Are you using ground poles in your training with your horse? I think ground poles are very often overlooked as something that we can use initially and then, they're not all that important going forward. However, I really don't think there's anything further than the truth. And today I want to tell you just how good ground poles can be for both you and your horse when working them into your training program. Okay, let's dive in. Hey there, and welcome to the Daily Strides podcast. My name is Lorna Leeson. I'm an equestrian trainer and coach, and I work with riders from all over the world, particularly riders who are working alone without the help of a full-time trainer and coach to improve their riding and also improve their skills when it comes to training their own horses. Okay, so I mentioned about ground poles, and I really do love ground poles. Now, there's a couple of things that I love, and I mention it all the time, but ground poles are just brilliant, and I think they're so overlooked. And I think they're overlooked for a couple of reasons. The first one being, as I mentioned, a lot of people see them as being something for the very beginning, okay? And, you're not needing to do anything with them after that. I don't think anything could be further than the truth. But I also think ground poles can be overlooked because many people feel that it's just too complicated. It's too complicated to, first of all, figure out the distances, to secondly, actually get yourself a couple of poles, and then thirdly, to know what to actually look for with the ground poles. And I think therefore so many riders are just kind of put off by them. They're like, it's a little bit more kind of work than there needs to be, and who really cares? And I think that it's well worth your time in getting yourself a couple of ground poles, and whether they are kind of fancy kind of show jumping poles or coloured poles, or whether they're just poles that somebody, some kind soul or yourself cut from a forest or something, that they're fairly straight-ish, okay? It could be old fencing posts that are lying around, or spare fencing posts that are lying around. There are so many different ways you can get your hands on poles, straight-ish poles, okay? Of all varieties, lengths and sizes, okay? And how you can then begin to use them and almost have this massive pivotal change in how you're working with your horse to not only improve your horse's training and balance, but also the agility and just the overall kind of performance and the wellness. And I think it's well worth the effort to do it. Okay, so today I want to dive into a couple of the reasons that ground poles are so good. So the first one is, well, what I've mentioned already, they do definitely enhance the coordination and the balance, okay? And this is whether you're asking them to walk over the poles, to trot or to canter, or even to go through the poles, which is also can be a question in and of itself. You set up poles that your horse has to go through or between, okay? So there's no actual going over. They can all be used to improve balance and coordination. And I think this is particularly important for young or inexperienced horses. A lot of the time we think of green horses as just being babies or young horses, and that's not true. Green horses can be horses who, for whatever reason, never really got very far with their actual training, and they can be any age, any shape, any size, and you can then help them to improve their coordination and their balance using ground poles as well. And of course, they're not just for young horses, hey? Because ground poles, and this is the second thing I want to get into, they really and truly can be so helpful for your horse when it comes to improving core strength. Now, we all know as riders how important our core is for, just all around kind of standing upright, hey? But when we're riding in particular, and particularly when you're thinking about building on that whole balance and coordination, it's a lot of it comes down to our ability to, I suppose, hold ourselves or to carry ourselves through our core. Now, your horse is no different. And the simple act, have you ever tried lifting your legs higher, okay? Walking around and just lifting your legs higher off the ground. And you'll notice that, of course your legs have to work a bit, okay? But it's actually your core that does a lot of the work. And it's the same for your horse. Just the fact of lifting their legs slightly higher off the ground to walk over a ground pole is actually engaging your horse's muscles, core, abdomen, whatever you want to call it, okay? It's engaging everything there in a different way, and it is definitely helping. And of course, we want this when it comes to improving lightness with our horses, okay? And when we build on to connection and contact, okay? core strength is very, very important in this. So using ground poles can really and truly help your horse, okay, to do this in his training. Now, the third point is ground poles can also be used to begin encouraging your horse to adjust stride length. Now, do I think this is what you start out with at the beginning? No. Not at all, okay? In fact, I really and truly believe that initially you want your horse to dictate the length of the strides, okay? Your horse to dictate where the poles are going to be. And what I'll often encourage riders to do is just to roll the pole until you find that happy place that your horse is comfortable working in, okay? But then later, once your horse has become more familiar, more comfortable, more coordinated, more balanced, and stronger through their overall core and everything, you can begin to actually roll the pole to ask bigger, different questions of your horse. And of course, this becomes really important if we're thinking about working towards different disciplines, maybe even competing. And that is, like, we all automatically jump to show jumping and dressage, but this is also important for on the trail, that you can begin to adjust the length of your horse's stride to have more safety and more flexibility about what is going on, okay? I do think that that's really important. Now, I also think then, building on that, ground poles can be used to develop your horse's gaits, okay? So the gaits being the walk, the trot, the canter, the gallop, okay? Now, you can really and truly begin to develop rhythm. And if we think of rhythm as being one of the most basic principles of training, ground poles are often really, really important and a really key tool that we can use to begin to develop rhythm and to define rhythm with our horses, okay? And the consistency that the ground poles kind of build in to what's going on with you and your horse, it contributes not only physically, okay, we've already mentioned all that, but also helps you, the rider, to begin to develop more feel when it comes to your horse and working in the different gaits as well. And I think that it's important to really and truly point out that, you know, in riding lessons, okay, and if we think of riding lessons as being, we're working with riders here who are basically focusing on themselves for the vast majority of the lesson. They're not focusing really on the horse's way of going. It's kind of getting the basics down, getting all that onto autopilot for themselves. Well, ground poles really help with that, okay? It helps the rider to begin to feel a little bit more, because there is such a difference between walking, just walking, and walking over ground poles. And bringing that difference to the rider's attention can often be a key part to the rider then beginning to almost like associate different movement with different gaits and different things that are going on within the gait. So I do think ground poles are really important there as well. Now, ground poles also can be used to boost confidence and trust. And I know you're probably thinking, what? But really and truly, okay, when you begin to kind of creatively, okay, so you can get creative with this, but doing it in a way that's safe, sensible, and yeah, you're not asking too big of a question. When you do that, you can begin to help your horse to actually develop his own confidence, okay? And it also allows you to begin to develop your confidence in your abilities to work with your horse, and whether that is just initially kind of helping your horse out, but then moving on to more of a trainer role for your horse, the ground poles are really going to help as well, okay? Because as your horse begins to kind of navigate, if you want, okay, the ground poles, he's beginning to feel more confident. He's like, oh, look, I've got this. I can move my legs and I can do this, that, the other, and I didn't fall over. This is marvelous, okay? And then he will be then from there, and this is a key part, he's going to begin to trust you more when it comes to you asking questions that maybe a little bit push his comfort zone, okay? Because you start small and you just gradually work. And remember, the horse will always dictate the distance between the poles initially, okay? And you're working with him. Like over time, when you ask bigger questions, he'd be like, oh, but everything else she asked worked out. Yeah, I think I could chance this as well. I think we could do it together, okay? And you get that win from the two of you. So not only builds confidence in himself and in his own abilities, but also builds his confidence in you as well. And of course, builds your confidence in you as well. Okay, and then the final thing that I want to touch on here, and I think that this is really important, is that ground poles really and truly help to provide a little bit of variety, if you want, in your training, okay? Things can get monotonous if you're just using like the same old exercises over and over and over again, okay? But when you can begin to become a little bit creative, as we said, okay, about how you're using your ground poles. And I'm not saying complicated. Creative and complicated are not the same thing, hey? Okay, in fact, creativity, you want to simplify everything, okay? But I do think when you can become a little bit creative, it kind of adds this extra level. And in fact, you'll see that most riders who are working at a high level in all disciplines, it doesn't matter what discipline, they will in some shape, way or form use ground poles within their training for this, because at the end of the day it helps to prevent boredom and monotony from creeping in. And as trainers, I think that this is really important. We have to factor in that we have to keep enjoying the work, but that our horse has to keep enjoying it as well. Okay, what I'm going to invite you to do is pop over to stridesforsuccess.com/1180. I don't know why the URL is that. I don't know why I decided to choose that particular URL for this particular freebie, but I did. There's an exercise in there. It's a ground pole exercise. It can be worked on the ground work, or it can be worked on in the saddle, okay, ridden work. But there's loads of different ways that you can work with this exercise. I think there's 7 different ways to work with this one simple exercise that requires, I think, 3 poles off the top of my head. It's totally free. You can get it over at stridesforsuccess.com/1180. Okay, I am going to leave it there. Have a lovely week. Keep well, and I'll chat to you soon. Be good. Bye.